Oh god, oh man, we're back. Yeah, I didn't expect to see myself back in this saddle for a while, but here we are. Needless to say, the first Iceberg was a success, and it's my most viewed video by a big margin. I didn't plan on making a second, but it's a big topic and there's a lot further I could have gone. So instead of doing the usual and making an iceberg for a different topic, I went ahead and I made a sort of extension, if you will. We're going to be picking up right where the last iceberg left off, shifting the topic a bit more towards the dark side of the subject. We're talking conspiracies, apocalyptic scenarios, and a good amount of quantum physics in what I'm going to be calling the dark version of the geography iceberg. The theme does stretch a bit here and there, but it all relates back to locations and those locations' importance in our world, so without any further ado, let's get going. Kicking off Tier 1, we have extrajudicial territory, essentially places where laws don't apply the same way. The biggest and most obvious of these is probably international waters, where you can get away with pretty much anything if you want to. There's a pretty infamous video on the internet that you shouldn't look up of some fishermen just committing a total massacre off the coast of Indonesia, and they were never prosecuted for it, because international waters are just a complete clusterfuck. There are some other places in the world that operate the same way, namely Antarctic unclaimed areas, and there's also a myth that somewhere in the Grand Canyon you can legally get away with murder, but that's also completely false, so yeah. Cryptogeography is a catch-all term for strange places, just like cryptozoology is a catch-all term for strange animals. We're going to go more into detail on some of these later on in the iceberg, but essentially what this boils down to is these are the location SCPs in the real world. For example, there's this place called the Devil's Tree in the northeastern United States that's an old dead tree that emits heat for no known reason and is said to curse anyone who touches it. That'd be a cryptogeographical location. That's not a word. Anyway. Control maps are just what it says on the tin, a map of the control of different forces in a region. See, while a country's borders generally tell you who owns what, in a war zone that's not the simplest thing to do. ISIS control maps go across multiple countries in these weird spiderweb-like formations, and they're just one of many different factions you can map out like this. Mystery triangles are a phenomenon where a location is purported to have some otherworldly energy about it that causes bad things to happen to anyone going into it. The most famous of these is the Bermuda Triangle off the Atlantic coast of North America, but there are way more in the world, such as the Bennington Triangle in Vermont, the Dragon's Triangle in Japan, and many more. A lot of these can be chalked up to rough terrain, but there's still a lot of weird occurrences that don't exactly fit the explanation in each. So, we already talked about Antarctica in the first tier of this iceberg, so what's it doing on the dark iceberg? Well, this is here because of a lot of different theories, most of them crackpot nonsense theories, about the seventh continent. A lot of people believe that at some point there were Antarctic natives that died out sometime before it was semi-colonized, including the Nazis, who also believed that the aliens had set up shop down there and built some access to a secret underground city. Nazi expeditions to Antarctica were even sent out to find these aliens, but of course nothing ever came up. Basically, if you can think of some crackpot shit, someone probably thinks it's in Antarctica. Blurred borders are a further extension of the control map idea from earlier. If you go on Google Maps, you can see a handful of locations that are just dotted lines demarcating a disputed border, such as South Sudan and Kenya's border, South Sudan and Sudan's weird Abyei region, tons of places in China, the Jammu and Kashmir region, etc. This is just further reinforcing the idea that borders are not at all set in stone and are constantly changing. Even if we're not talking about disputed locations, there's actually an island on the French and Spanish border that changes country every 6 months. Why? Who knows? There's nothing on it. It's completely pointless, but it's also fantastic. Alright, hear me out. Multiverses are on this iceberg because of one simple line of reasoning. If we consider geography to be the study of locations and those locations' relation to other locations, the multiverse theory has a lot of weight, especially given some things later on in this iceberg. I think it's important to consider other worlds where the map isn't the same, or other weird shit. Is it a stretch? Yes. Do I care? Not really. It's cool. It's my iceberg. Fuck you. And with that, we're starting Tier 2 with the Finland Conspiracy, or in essence, any conspiracy that follows the same format. The idea of this is, have you ever been to Finland? Do you know anybody that's been to Finland? If no, then you can't prove Finland exists. And it's usually a joke, but for some people it goes a step further, usually Redditors. The more serious members of the anti-Finnish community believe that the Finnish language is an offshoot of Japanese due to some strange superficial similarities that the languages share, and that the Finnish territory is actually owned by Sweden. This conspiracy falls apart when you just consider for like half a second why. Like, why fake Finland's existence? Why copy it off of Japanese? Who knows? Aliens or something. Tel Megiddo, or by its proper name, Armageddon, is a mountain in Israel that, according to the Bible, is going to be the place where the Battle of Armageddon takes place. It's interesting to see this location as a real-world place that exists, because most biblical stuff is like ancient ruins or unverifiable, like Noah's Ark and the Hanging Gardens and all that shit, but the alleged place where the final battle of the universe takes place is right there. Of course, it's a very holy site, and it's just an interesting place to dive into if you're interested in the Book of Revelation's weird prophecies. Puppet states are a system of government in which one country takes its orders almost directly from another country. This was very big in the Cold War, where the USSR and the US would essentially appoint leaders they approved of to various countries and democratically overthrow those they disapproved of, essentially leading to countries whose leaders didn't give a shit about their people and just wanted to give all their natural resources to America or Russia. Sadly, this still happens to this day, such as the attempted coup of Venezuelan President Maduro in 2019, as well as the successful coup of Bolivian President Evo Morales in the same year by the United States for their sweet natural resources. And by the way, I don't like Maduro, but it was pretty much an attempt at creating a puppet state when the US tried to overthrow them. Climate change maps are a depressing reality that some of the world is going to sink in the next few decades as climate change hits the big one and essentially starts wiping coastlines off the map. Pacific islands like Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Kiribati are going to sink entirely, and most countries are going to be left devastated by the effects that were totally preventable about 20 years ago, but gotta make money off those oil lobbies. Got to make the money. Megaliths are enormous ancient structures that were built by who knows who for who knows why. Famous megaliths include Stonehenge, Longman, the Nazca Lines, the Plain of Jars, and many, many more. These are basically just giant structures from prehistory that are sometimes explained, like Stonehenge being the remains of an ancient amphitheater, but some of these are confusing to archaeologists to this day. Nobody knows why the Plain of Jars was built, and given that the US bombed it to shreds to fight those damn dirty commies in Vietnam, we probably never will. Fallout areas are the places where radiation is so bad that it's deadly to even set foot there. These include sites of nuclear disasters, nuclear test sites, and that's about it. Unfortunately for future generations, these locations are set to stay extremely deadly and toxic for the next 100 years at minimum, with some locations like the infamous Chernobyl being so radioactive that it'll take thousands of years to naturally clear up. Some sites, like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that were bombed by nuclear warfare, they're not as badly radiated to this day, but other sites, like Bikini Atoll and some other test sites in North America, they have giant concrete covers for their radiation that have to be replaced pretty often. Lake Baikal is a lake in Siberia that's the deepest lake on the planet. As such, it's also the site of a lot of weird occurrences in native legends. Some parts of Lake Baikal don't make sense to the scientists studying it, and others are studied for being, a completely unique biosphere on the planet given how deep it is. It's the site of several cryptid and alien sightings and rumors, and is basically shorthand for, I need a creepy place in the woods of Russia for any wannabe creepypasta authors. Like, go on the SCP Wiki and filter by Russia, and you're gonna find like 700 SCPs that are all in Lake Baikal. It is a weird-ass lake, though. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff that goes down here. Finishing up Tier 2, we have Lost Continents, which are exactly what it says on the tin. This encapsulates both mythical lost continents like Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, and the very real continents that used to exist but due to tectonic shifts and sea level changes don't anymore. These submerged continents include Zealandia, Doggerland, Beringia, and a whole host of other places buried at the bottom of the sea. Of course, you can put the two together and say that somewhere like Mu is just an ancient civilization discovering a continent that's now sunk. But the jury's still out on that one proof-wise. Starting off Tier 3, we have the Zuni, which are a Native American tribe in the Midwest that for most accounts aren't remarkable, but according to one researcher, there's actually evidence that the Zuni are descended from Japanese settlers from way, way back. See, the Zuni language, like Finnish apparently, has a lot of similarities to Japanese, and they hold a lot of strangely similar traditions. Even more so, according to the book written by this researcher, DNA testing proved that in modern Zuni people's blood was some Japanese. This theory is largely not accepted by others in the field, but it's interesting and kind of plausible that thousands of years ago, some Japanese sailors made it to America and set up shop. I mean, the Russians did it in Alaska, why not the Japanese? Also, if you're noticing some similarities to Wendigoon's conspiracy iceberg, consider that his iceberg has about 500 items on it, so there's bound to be some overlap with any iceberg that dips its toes into conspiracies. That being said, I did use this video to springboard my most recent video about the Harlepool monkey, so yeah, he's great, check him out if you haven't. Pluto's Gate is a location in the field of cryptogeography, as previously discussed, in Turkey, that according to ancient legend was also a gate to the underworld. This was unexplained for some time, but it was well known that anyone who stayed the night inside of the gate never came back alive. Eventually it was found that during the night the cooling air caused the CO2 levels to rise to unsafe degrees, alongside some other noxious gases, and suffocate anyone inside, while during the day it's just barely warm enough to safely enter. It's really weird and a really cool place. Supervolcanoes are the somewhat well-known geographic phenomenon where massive volcanoes lie dormant underneath the Earth, these volcanoes being massive enough to wipe out a decent chunk of civilization should they erupt. There are 12 supervolcanoes in the Americas, with the only others on Earth being in New Zealand and Indonesia. If one of these goes off, it wouldn't be enough to end the world outright, but it would coat several thousand miles in ash and kill untold hundreds of thousands of people. The most unfortunate placement of these is the 6 that are all clustered together on the border of Argentina and Bolivia. Just an absolute orbital strike of hellfire if these ever go off, because they'd almost certainly trigger each other's explosions. So, in the study of outer space, there's a general sphere around the Earth that we can see, and a much, much larger sphere that we can't. This is the unobserved universe, or the unobservable universe for pessimists. This section of the universe is almost completely unknown to us, including its size. However, scientists have speculated that the unobserved universe constitutes anywhere from 95% to 99.99999%, and so on of the universe as a whole. Disappearing countries are the sad reality that over the course of human history, up to and including the present day, cultures have been wiped out or faded into obscurity over time. This includes instances of colonists wiping out local tradition for the sake of money-making, acts of genocide, and the very common act by the USSR of Russification, wherein Soviet republics would be forced to transition from their own language to the Russian language and change their culture to assimilate to be more, Russian. It's just a sad facet of reality, and it does continue to this day. Okay, have you ever seen the movie Us? Well, if you haven't, in the first screen of the movie it tells us that there are basically thousands of underground abandoned tunnels in the United States, the majority of which are completely unexplained. Now, you would think this would be setting up the movie, and it is, but it's actually true, and it's true for much more than the US. Across nearly every country there are these buried, abandoned tunnels that have sat there for decades. Some of these can be explained as abandoned metro plans, nuclear bunkers, and what have you, but some are a lot more sinister. In Moscow, there's actually a secret tunnel system that was built underneath the metro system that was theorized to be used to transport members of the government from place to place in case of a nuclear war. Of course, nuclear war with Russia never broke out, so it's been abandoned, but some claim it's still used to visit an underground city built under Moscow. And of course, this was the inspiration for the Metro 2033 series of books and subsequent games. Good games. I haven't played any other than the first one, but it's quality. Uncontacted peoples are tribes and ethnicities that aren't a part of the connected world as a whole and have not been contacted by outside peoples. These include several Amazonian tribes, Aboriginal tribes, and the infamous Sentinelese on the North Sentinel Island off the coast of India. A group of people that kill anyone who comes close to their island. Numerous attempts have been made to contact the Sentinelese with no success, and given what happened in nearly every other Pacific island that the British eventually got their grubby mitts on, I can't exactly say I blame them. Nowadays, it's forbidden to go to the island, but that doesn't stop morons from doing so anyway, thinking they're the chosen one. And, of course, if they ever were actually contacted without, them killing the person who was trying to contact them, they would probably get disease and be completely wiped out, like a lot of Native Americans were when the Americans first came. The Americans as in the not Native Americans, but the now Americans, you get what I'm talking about. I'm just kind of stalling at this point. Let's move on. Plum Island is an island off the coast of New York that served as the United States testing ground for various illegal and extremely dangerous biowarfare and disease tests from the 50s onward. Essentially, this served as a way for the US to test what would happen if they were to poison the livestock in a certain area under the cover of being testing that livestock's reception to certain diseases. This dives into conspiracy shit, but this island was blamed for several outbreaks of livestock disease in the local areas, although the US government vehemently denies any connection. Basically, if you remember Vozrozhdenia Island from my RLC video, it's that. Man, I talk about a lot of really weird and dark islands on this show, don't I? I mean, it's good content, I think. It's good stories. Poison cities are the various cities around the world that have been rendered uninhabitable due to chemical shenanigans. These include the famous Times Beach, which was poisoned by an outbreak of Agent Orange and subsequently abandoned, and the even more famous in modern times Flint, Michigan, which is way, way bigger. Almost all of these can be chalked up to rampant and unchecked capitalism, like in Flint the city changed the water reservoir for the sake of having money despite the risks that it would poison everybody in the town, and whoops, it poisoned everybody in the town. Who could have thunk it? Secret societies are the lizard people aliens that truly run the world. There are so fucking many of these theories out there that it's impossible to list them all, but the big two are probably the Freemasons and the Illuminati, both of which are completely fucking unpinnable. Like, everyone that's had a bit too many hits on the head will blame the Illuminati for misplacing the TV remote. This is basically what if there was a secret shadow organization coordinating everything in the world. It's a tempting theory, but look at the state of things. I don't think anyone's puppeteering the whole thing at the very least. Maybe some parts of it, but the whole thing? Nah, no way. And with that, we're moving down to tier 4. The false reality theory is a pretty simple theory that encapsulates a lot of stuff. Basically, imagine the Matrix. Stop imagining, that's about it. It's a simple and easy to grasp concept, and it's one of those conspiracies that sounds ridiculous and doesn't have a shred of proof in it for the most part, but you can't really disprove it 100%, which means it's obviously right. Just the idea that reality is a lie and there's some simulation shit going on is an explanation for reality itself. The Sea People are a group of people from 1200 BC that attacked various places around the Mediterranean and have been marked down in the history books of those times. What's odd about them is they don't have any nation or anything attached to them, just the ocean. This has caused a lot of speculation among historians as to what the Sea People actually were. A massive band of pirates, people from some unknown nation, or maybe Atlanteans, who knows? It's an interesting topic to read about, because there's just this bunch of people that existed for a while and then didn't, and nobody knows where they came from. Okay, Isla Bermeja is a fun one. It was an island off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico that was used as the boundary between the US and Mexico's maritime boundaries. However, sometime in the 1900s, the island vanished, or it never existed at all, and they just found out about that in the 1900s. Most people attribute this to either the map was just an error, or the sea levels rose and the island was buried. But a large conspiracy exists that says the United States bombed the island out of existence in order to tap an oil reserve that they would gain access to if the maritime boundaries between Mexico and the US were defined without that island in the equation. Now, the evidence for this is shaky at best, but what can I say? I love a good island. Eden is the purported location of the biblical Garden of Eden. You know how back in Tier 2 I talked about how Tel Megiddo is unique compared to all the hazy locations in the Bible we can't pin down? Yeah, this is one of those hazy locations. Supposedly the site of the Garden of Eden is somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, but that's a wide area. Other locations suggested include places in Ethiopia, Ireland, and even the US, although that last one might not be so valid. Although, New Orleans is pretty good. Maybe. You never know. The Svalbard Doomsday Vault is an underground bunker in the Norwegian territory of Svalbard. See, a lot of money over the years has been sunk into keeping the world afloat if some apocalypse happens, and the Svalbard Vault is one of the biggest examples of that. Inside the vault are millions of seeds that have millions of different plants designed to restart the world in the event of some nuclear holocaust. It's still maintained to this day, with new seeds being added every day, which is pretty cool. And it's also on this tiny island in the Arctic Circle that basically nobody but people there for the vault go to, so yeah, it's probably not going anywhere. Thanks, Norway. Dependency theorem, or the political ideology it's based off of, neocolonialism, is an extension of the puppet state idea from earlier. The idea goes that smaller countries are controlled by larger ones up to, during the Cold War, the big two superpowers. These are controlled not using colonies, but by strategically placed financial aid and support. Essentially, this theorem states that colonialism in the modern day takes the approach of indebting a country to yourself and keeping it down so that it can't break free of your influence. Now, I just summed up in a few sentences a massively complicated geopolitical theory, so if you want to learn more, do your own research, but I think that you get the gist. On Earth, we know less about the ocean floor than we do about space. 95% of Earth's oceans are completely unexplored due to the sheer pressure of going that low. Diving is almost as dangerous and expensive at some depths as space travel, which has led to, that startling percentage. It's weird to think about in a world that's fully mapped at all times by satellites, but we don't know anything about what's under most of these waves. It's crazy. Alternate universe travelers are the phenomenon in which people will appear seemingly out of nowhere claiming to be from a country or place that doesn't exist. The most famous one of these is the Man from Taured, which I actually have a video on debunking. But it's far from an isolated phenomenon. There's various other accounts of travelers from countries that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, as well as a rather famous one about two children with blue skin appearing in Europe and claiming to be from another world that was underneath our current one. Which brings us to the last of Tier 4, the infamous Agartha, which is the kingdom under the world. See, in a lot of conspiracies, the Earth is either hollow or filled with caves that stretch for miles and miles. Inside of these caves is purported to be an ancient kingdom called Agartha, which, depending on who you ask, is either the domain of devil worshippers, Nazis that escaped there after the war, a technically advanced super race, or giants. Like pretty much everything on this list, there's a lot that I'm leaving out for the sake of time, but just know that this theory was pretty much taken as fact by some Nazi high command, with dozens of expeditions going out in an attempt to find the kingdom. Alright, Tier 5, and here we have the idea that the USSR didn't actually collapse, or at least didn't collapse in the way that we think it did. It's very hard to deny that a lot of countries gained independence from the USSR at the time, but some people believe that the Soviet leadership simply went into incognito mode to further facilitate global communism. These people are usually the same people who think that global communism is when Wendy's is out of bacon, but I figured it deserved to be on this list just for being a very prominent conspiracy that would drastically affect world geography if true. Like, Russia right now is very, very capitalist, so if it is the Soviet Communist Party from way back when puppeteering it, they're doing a pretty bad job. But like, this conspiracy is pretty prominent. Indian Lake is a lake in the northeastern United States that's allegedly one of the blackest black sites in US history. Apparently during MKUltra, which was when the CIA was testing brainwashing techniques on the unsuspecting public, an even more secretive branch of said project took place at a research lab in the area surrounding Indian Lake. This project was allegedly the branch of MKUltra focused on manipulating childhood development through the same methods used in MKUltra, i.e. drugs and extremely illegal and abusive medical procedures, just on children this time because why not? Given that most of MKUltra's information was burned before publication, I kind of believe that given how everything we know about it is fucking horrifying, there's gotta be worse shit out there like the Indian Lake stuff that was burned up. The reversed universe is an interesting one and a recent one. See, last year certain particles and wavelengths were discovered by science labs that indicate the possibility of a mirrored universe to our own in one interpretation. That is, a universe where time flows backwards. Of course, that's just one interpretation of the data, but it's really neat to think about how we're getting closer and closer each day to just proving the multiverse theory. Then where are you gonna be, huh? You'll be disappointing, but twice at the same time. Alright, this is a bit of a longer one, so bear with me. Boltzmann brain reality is another false reality theory, but it's the one that actually has a disturbing amount of proof behind it. You see, scientists theorize that most of the universe is comprised of a substance called dark energy, which is basically a chaos particle. It doesn't work the way the laws of physics do and can basically assemble into anything at any time, which is what caused the Big Bang and the subsequent antimatter displacement that allows our universe to exist. Given the projected time span of the universe, a scientist named Boltzmann theorized that this dark energy would have enough time to randomly coagulate into the shape of a human brain, complete with consciousness and memory intact for a single second before dying instantly in the void of space. Furthermore, there was enough time in this universe's lifespan to create out of dark energy every possible combination of particles trillions of times over, and thus every possible instance of a human brain. With this in mind, there's just an almost infinite number of brains in a vacuum somewhere with the exact same thoughts that you are experiencing right now. To the point that there is a likelihood between a human actually experiencing the reality as it is and a Boltzmann brain of about 1 trillion to 1. This theory has yet to be disproved, by the way. Yeah. The Vatican archives are the biggest collection of forbidden knowledge on this planet. Deep within the Vatican City, there's a room that only the Pope can access, and his Pope friends. This contains all of the knowledge that the Catholic Church has ever assembled about whatever. In the bit of the archives that journalists can access, under heavy supervision and with scrutiny, mind you, there's untold numbers of manuscripts dating back hundreds, if not thousands of years, and that's just the shit we know about. Keep in mind, the Catholic Church is huge now, but it used to be enormous. This is the combined knowledge of what was, for hundreds of years, arguably the most powerful government on the planet. Needless to say, conspiracy theorists have a field day with this one. One-world governments are based on the idea that a single country unites the entire world. This is essentially a government that takes control over the entire world and either rules it from the shadows, see the secret societies from earlier, or outright rules it with an iron fist. This wouldn't really work in the current landscape of the planet, but a lot of people think it's already happened. Now, the world did get close to this a few times, with various conquesting and conquering empires throughout history, but it's never really been achieved and probably won't be. American eugenics is the sad fact that the eugenics programs in Nazi Germany were unfortunately inspired by the US's own eugenics program against its Native American and African American populations. In fact, the gas chambers used in Nazi Germany were explicitly models created by American companies to kill disproportionately black prisoners. In addition to this, there were the infamous Tuskegee experiments in which black men and women were subjugated to horrible diseases for the sake of research, and instances where doctors were instructed to forcibly sterilize black women during C-section operations and other medical procedures, a process that continues to this day in the current border camps. Yeah. Territory gambling is what you have to blame for why India and Bangladesh's border is so fucking bad. Essentially, during the days of yore, when kingdoms were the hot shit in India, people liked to gamble. These people included kings and queens and princes, and sometimes your bet of 5 million rupees just isn't enough, and you have to throw in a small village in the eastern part of your country. Allegedly, this is why the border between the two countries is so messy, and it's just very funny to me. Lastly, in this tier we have Pangaea Proxima. See, when the continent split apart millions of years ago, it wasn't something that stopped in the modern day. Pangaea Proxima is the supercontinent that is set to form in several million or billion years out of the continents currently on the planet. Eventually, and I really do mean eventually here, they'll reincorporate into one massive supercontinent again, this supercontinent called Pangaea Proxima. There are different theories on how exactly it's going to form, but barring some apocalypse that yeets the whole planet, it will form at some point, whether or not humans are there to see it. To start off Tier 6, we have a device somewhere in Russia, commonly theorized to be in the Yamantau Mountains, called a dead hand device. Now, you may have heard of this from the game Call of Duty, but I assure you, the existence of this device, somewhere in Russia, is completely known and declassified. Essentially, the dead hand device is set to detect a nuclear explosion on Russian soil and, if not deactivated by the right people, send nuclear missiles to the United States as retaliation. It's built with the intention of, if Russia is destroyed in a war, they'll still get the last laugh and destroy the United States in the process. Again, this is not a conspiracy, this is a documented, actual device that exists somewhere in Russia and is still in use today. The conspiracy parts are the location of the device and the bombs themselves, as some have stated that instead of simply attacking the United States, which would be a catastrophic loss of life in the first place, Russia's petty enough to tip their bombs with enough cobalt to poison the entire Earth, and essentially end the world if they ever lose a war. Not a fun thought, and that's why it's in Tier 6. Also, just a fun side note, Russia is actually in the process of developing a nuclear missile that goes so fast it cannot be shot down by defense systems. Like the ones that shoot a missile at a missile to counteract it so that it doesn't, blow up a city. Yeah, they're gonna bypass that, so even that wouldn't save us if it came down to activating the dead hand. So you've definitely heard of the term nuclear winter before, but have you heard of the nuclear summer effect that comes after? You see, waiting out the nuclear winter isn't such a simple thing, as some scientists predict that after a phase of cooling brought by nuclear warfare, there will be such a shift in global temperature that the planet basically boils alive. It would then go back and forth between nuclear winters and summers, essentially rendering the Earth even more uninhabitable than the generally accepted model. Great. The far future describes shifts in Earth and Earth's population and space and all that jazz as the years go by to a frankly insane degree. There's a timeline of the far future on Wikipedia that serves as a very frank, but very, very disturbing look into what's going to happen to the universe as it ages, from the predicted universal collapse scenarios to the aforementioned dark energy formed Boltzmann brains, and everything in between. It's an interesting read, and unless I forget to do it, as I am somewhat prone to do, it'll be in the description below. I don't like to talk about Israel very much on this channel, with the exception of our buddy Yaakov Kirshen, who was a really easy target, because it tends to bring the weirdos into the comments from what I've heard. That being said, this topic was too weird not to cover. The Third Temple is a theoretical temple in Jerusalem that's to be built at the current site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. You see, before the mosque was in place, there were 2 temples before it, one of them being the famous Solomon's Temple, which is an incredibly important location to pretty much every Abrahamic religion. See, if you remember recently, before the, attempted genocide in Gaza, Israel was trying to take over and subsequently destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is currently in the Palestinian half of Jerusalem. This happens pretty frequently, and it's because they want to build this 3rd temple there according to the Jewish faith. Now, where the apocalypse part comes in is that according to most versions of Christianity, when Israel builds the 3rd temple, that's actually what triggers the rapture as foretold in the book of Revelations. So a bunch of Christian TV evangelists who, if we're being honest with ourselves, don't have the best track record with Jewish people, actually support and lobby to pass legislation that would ensure this temple is built for the express purpose of ending the world and bringing Christ back, according to their religion. It just goes to show that Final Fantasy villains do actually exist. Like, there's some 90-year-olds that are like, hell yeah, let's end everything. And they're doing it through this, kooky Book of Revelations literalism shit. Anoxic events are events in prehistory that have been caused by lack of oxygen in the water supply. This is due to a bunch of different factors that all combine to basically render Earth's oceans acidic and toxic. This, understandably, is extremely fucking deadly and coincides with mass extinction events pretty commonly, although it's usually not the root cause of it. Basically, Earth's oxygen levels reset during this time, and have to go back to normal through a lot of long and complicated processes that I'm not equipped to talk about. Recently, scientists have noted that our oceans are starting to show early warning signs of another anoxic event taking place, which segues us into our last topic for Tier 6. The 6th mass extinction is the mass extinction that, according to some scientists, we're currently seeing the beginning of. In history, there have been mass extinctions in the fossil record that usually represented some calamity or what have you that caused the death of millions of species as they found themselves unable to adapt to the post-calamity environment of the Earth. Theories on these extinctions range from meteors to the previously mentioned anoxic events to whatever the fuck Death Stranding was about, and according to a good lot of scientists, we're actually about to see another one soon, caused by our own disrespect of the planet's natural resources. With that joyous bit of information, it's time for the final tier. Now, one thing that you'll never see on an iceberg chart, one thing that nobody knows about, one thing that's truly in the ascended, galaxy brain, tainted, abyss-level, transcended layer of the iceberg, is facts about icebergs, baby. Icebergs are huge shelves of ice that break off from ice-covered landmasses like Antarctica or are formed in the Arctic Ocean. That's about it. They're not very complicated. I mean, one hit the Titanic, that's kinda cool. I mentioned them in the first iceberg as the way polar bears got to Iceland. Yeah, this bit's dragged out too long, let's cut it. Thanks for watching. I know this one is a bit shorter than the last iceberg, but I didn't really want to drag it out with a bunch of filler shit, because I feel like that was kind of a problem on the last one. I don't think I'm gonna do another iceberg. I have a ton of ideas for the regular show, and there's not really a whole lot more that I could talk about in an iceberg format without just sacrificing some of the topics that I would rather just make a full episode about. So if you liked how I speak, if you liked my sense of humor, if you like my style, go ahead and subscribe. If you want more iceberg type content, I got a sort of long form video where I rank every country's flag, and I will try to make longer videos every now and then because I do enjoy a good variety in video length. But you can look at most of my videos in a playlist called Every Geography Goat in Order. I think it has everyone in there, including the iceberg videos. So go ahead and give that a check out if you're new to the channel. If you're not new to the channel and you're wondering what the hell, where's the newest Geography Goat episode? You said that was coming. It's coming. I'm working on it. The recording's actually done for it. I just got to make the slides, and making the slides is the hardest part because it's really frickin' tedious. But yeah, a new episode in the proper format coming soon. I'm kind of just talking so that this gets to 40 minutes because that's like a nice even round number. I don't know if it does anything for the algorithm, but you know what does help the algorithm? Subscribing, commenting, give it a like. I don't blame you if you don't like the video, because I don't like that many videos, because I wish YouTube didn't automatically add it to a playlist. I don't know why, that's just kind of a pet peeve of mine, but you know, if you do like videos commonly, go ahead and give us a like if you enjoyed the video. But definitely, if you like this content, subscribe. Thank you for watching either way. I know, like, fucking nobody listens to these outros anyway. So, yeah, just me rambling. See you next time. Next time is the North Korean travel guide. It's coming soon, I swear to God.